I have got a fun Bible question to start off your day. What comes to mind when you hear the name Nimrod? Well, if you think idiot or dummy, congratulations. You have fallen prey to the greatest accidental culture shift in theological history. And it's all because of a cartoon rabbit. Let me explain. Hey everyone, I'm Colin, the resident nerd and Bible scholar here at the Bible Uncut and Unfiltered. In the Bible, Nimrod only shows up in Genesis chapter 10 as, quote, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And when ancient texts say that somebody was mighty, they really meant it. This guy was legendary. Some scholars have even tried to connect him to historical figures like powerful Assyrian kings or even warrior gods. Some traditions even link him back to Sargon of Akkad, one of the first empire builders in human history around 2300-ish BC. That guy's kingdom stretched across Mesopotamia and included Uruk, the city where Gilgamesh ruled according to mythology. But here's where it gets really interesting. In Jewish and Islamic traditions as well, Nimrod was not just a great hunter. He actually became the archetype of rebellion against God. He is portrayed as the ultimate tyrant, the king who said, "I give life and death," while arguing with the biblical figure Abraham. Now, this is in tradition, not in the Bible itself. He only shows up in a brief verse or two in Genesis 10. But some traditions will even say he had a hand in building the Tower of Babylon. Others say that he tried to kill Abraham as a baby because the stars predicted that Abraham would later destroy idolatry. The stories about him are absolutely wild. According to various traditions, he even ordered all babies killed to prevent the birth of Abraham. Very Pharaoh-coded, right? Well, when Abraham is born anyway and grows up to confront Nimrod, Nimrod has his people gather wood for 4 years to build the biggest bonfire ever and burn Abraham alive. But then Abraham just walks out of the fire unharmed. Sounds much like the story of Daniel's 3 friends in the book named after him. Other traditions have Nimrod showing up with a massive army to fight Abraham, who defeats him with an army of gnats. In some versions, a gnat or mosquito even crawls into Nimrod's brain and drives him insane as divine punishment. Whether he repented or kept rebelling depends on which tradition you read, but one thing is consistent across these stories. Nimrod is remembered as Nimrod the Evil in rabbinical writings. He is the poster child for tyrannical kings and idol worship. The Quran even includes a story of him arguing with Abraham about who has true power over life and death. So for thousands of years, if you heard the name Nimrod, you would think of this legendary warrior king rebel against God. It could be used as an insult, but in a way that it was calling a person tyrannical, rebellious, or hubristic. Someone who thought that they could challenge divine authority on their own. It definitely did not mean stupid. But that is what we think of today when we hear his name. So what happened? What changed? Well, in 1940, an episode of Looney Tunes called A Wild Hare aired. And this episode has Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd going back and forth. Elmer Fudd, as I'm sure many of you know, is a bumbling hunter who can never quite catch the wascally wabbit. And Bugs, being Bugs, sarcastically calls Elmer Nimrod. Now see, that joke only works if you knew the biblical Nimrod. Bugs was calling this terrible hunter, Nimrod, a legendary mighty hunter, as ironic mockery. It would be like calling a coward Rambo, or somebody who failed a test at school Einstein. The humor is in the contrast. The writers assumed that their audience would get the reference, and initially people may have. But here's what happened. As time went on and people were more familiar with Bugs Bunny cartoons than an obscure passage from the Bible, the name Nimrod became associated with Elmer Fudd's character. And people didn't realize that the joke was sarcastic. They didn't know about the biblical mighty hunter. They just connected Nimrod with this bumbling idiot on the screen. So as time has gone on, the name came to mean fool, dummy, or incompetent person, to the point that that definition is actually in the dictionary now. This is a perfect case study in how pop culture shapes language and collective memory. A figure who represented tyrannical rebellion for millennia gets reduced to a cartoon idiot in just a few generations' time. So the next time you hear someone using Nimrod as an insult, feel free to pull them aside and give this explainer of who Nimrod really was and how Bugs Bunny changed the interpretation of a Bible passage. And you'll probably never be invited back for Thanksgiving dinner, but that's okay. Either way, what is important to remember with this is that shared cultural references are constantly shifting, and sometimes even a cartoon rabbit can have more of an influence on language than centuries of religious tradition. This is really important for us to keep in the back of our minds whenever we study the Bible, because things that we think mean one thing in our culture may have actually meant something very different back then. So if you like this kind of study, we actually have a whole episode on Genesis 10 where we go into more detail of traditions about Nimrod and the other characters there. You can check it out on our website, thebibleuncut.com, or your favorite podcast player. Hope to see you there.